So today we are going to mostly focus on understanding this article, The Africanist Presence in American Concert Dance. It's by Brenda Dixon Gottschild, who's a dance scholar. She is drawing from, remember last week we talked about the aesthetic of cool. We read that article by Thompson about the African aesthetic of cool involving symbols such as water and fluidity and rising suaveness on top of emotion and sensation and everything else. So Dixon Gottschild is taking that idea, because remember Thompson was talking most about sculpture and painted art. So Dixon Gottschild is taking that idea and applying it to dance. And so according to her, there are 5 big markers that really let us know when we're watching a dance that it comes from an Africanist tradition. And let's just pause for a moment about the word Africanist, because a lot of these terms that we're using, this is really new scholarship, because I don't know if I have a specific timeline for how new it is, but let's just say I went to graduate school in dance in California, right? Bay Area, Oakland, in 2006 to 8, or 7 to 8, because I started in the spring. And at that time, we were still only really supposed to be doing modern, as in contemporary modern, and ballet, and like postmodern, and lest I say interpretive dance, as we all like that joking term that we use, but essentially like that's really what they wanted us to focus on in college. And that was 2006 in Oakland. So it's really been since then that there has started to really be forceful, authentic academic pushback against what's basically just been a bias, you know, the same kind of institutional racist bias that we have in all subjects. But for dance, we're really just breaking out of that in like since I went to college. So for example, I went to my specialty was modern dance in undergraduate at UC Berkeley, but my dance company when I went to school was a jazz dance company. And yet I couldn't do a thesis performance about jazz. There was one person who was allowed to do jazz in her thesis performance, and she had already been a rehearsal captain on tour on Broadway. She was like in Evita the musical all over the nation. And so she was allowed to choreograph a tap and jazz number because she was good enough that it was considered worthy. So like that bias, absolutely not that old. So in Brenda Dixon Gottschild's article here, she's using the word Africanist. You know, I should really know the date of this. When is this? 2001. Yeah, see? So like in the last 20 years, really college academia is finally getting over themselves. And the word Africanist in her usage is referring to basically anything that comes from that tradition, starting with the Middle Passage and diasporic African artistic elements. There's a newer article that I read this year where they start to clarify between Africanist and Africana, like, and I thought that was really helpful, even though it's maybe a tangent, but like Africanist meaning influenced by African aesthetic or African movements, and Africana meaning like coming directly from Africa currently, and also retaining, as opposed to like fusing and evolving in a diasporic fashion. Africana would be like, even if you were a dance company that lived in Sweden like this author was, but you were doing traditional African dance, that would be Africana as opposed to Africanist. So I don't know if that helps at all or if that just complicates things, but fun facts, right? Complicates things. Okay, so this article, 20 years old now, the element aesthetic of cool we started about. So she's adding in 4 additional markers, so to speak, that help us to identify Africanist influences. So they are, look, I updated this so it's even more clear. I took little quotes this morning. Embracing the conflict, polycentrism polyrhythm, high effect juxtaposition, Ephibism, and the aesthetic of cool from Thompson. So they do overlap. This is, I think, part of what makes them tricky. And Dixon Gottschild argues that embracing the conflict is kind of like her idea of the most overarching one, as is the aesthetic of cool, I think. Pardon me. But embracing the conflict means that you are, I love this quote that I found this morning, which is that, sorry, I got to put a space in there. In European white European art aesthetics, they're usually trying to make a piece that answers a question, or that is a completion of something, or that shows a whole story and gives you a moral in that tradition, right? Like it's a wrapped package that they hand to you, the audience, so that you can unwrap it and go, oh, I get it now. Embracing the conflict, though, values the posing of a question without the pressure to give an answer. So it also means that you're going to put 2 things together that maybe don't make any sense and not be apologetic about it. And I think that you could definitely argue that the idea of postmodern dance and like interpretive dance, as we're talking about it, that reflects that Africanist value, because they're just like, you know, I'm just expressing myself and it doesn't make any sense and you're leaving it out there rather than telling your audience what to do. I would say that that is an Africanist element that was borrowed from diasporic African culture in America. And it was a rebellion from ballet, for example. So next one, polycentrism polyrhythm. So they're contained as one aesthetic element, but they're 2 particular things. Polycentrism means that you are moving from more than one locus in your body. So really easy version of that, let's all put a hand in the air and like, hey, let's make it a jazz hit. Hi. And then at the same time, can you shake your head now? No. Right? Okay. Can you go? And then can you shake your head no at a different rhythm? Ah! Right, so polycentrism is 2 different places. Polyrhythm is 2 different or more different rhythms. That is absolutely an element of jazz music. Yeah, definitely did not come from Europe. Europeans are all, right, as we talked about, like the tradition is all about answering a question, showing your mastery, pulling it in line. And in ballet, which was the most codified dance at the time, on stages as opposed to social dances, we'll get to that in a hot second, the dancers that would at this time, so we're talking about, when are we talking about specifically? Let's say that we're talking about antebellum America up through the Jazz Age, for example. So we're still in corsets. We're upright people drinking, sipping tea, right? Remember the cakewalk happens in, well, it happened for a long time, but it happens in the late 1890s, and that was all about African dancers making fun of their white masters by putting on suits and like getting as tall as possible, and then breaking that, embracing the conflict of that by also doing really grounded and asymmetrical movement. And that was the hugest trend, to see cakewalkers do cakewalks. So, and then the other idea that is really different in polycentrism, in ballet, and even in early modern dance, all of your movement is supposed to come from like this controlled spine. So in ballet, you might see someone move their shoulders or upper torso a little bit, la 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 la, but the whole spine and center is supposed to be really upright, especially if you're a ballerina and you're on point shoes. Oh, I had a visual for this. I'm gonna turn the sound way down because that's not the important part here. Nope, that's not the right one, is it? Oh yeah, it's this one. This is some crazy dancing, you guys. Boop. Boop. Okay. Notice how incredibly breathtakingly straight her spine is. And this is the Black Swan, Black Swan. Great movie with Natalie Portman if you haven't seen it. This is obviously not Natalie Portman. This is the Royal Ballet from England. So we talked a little bit about how there's always contrast in art from all around the world. So a lot of the time, the example of contrast that we talk about in terms of ballet is the Swan Lake, in which there is a white swan who is a nice white girl, and then there's this black swan who is hired basically to tempt the prince away. So she is supposed to be a bad influence, quote unquote. And I think it's really interesting that she's definitely demonstrating the aesthetic of cool, but this is again a modern presentation. So I'm pulling this up as an example that we're going to contrast from. Yeah, let's get back here. So everything, all those turns, turn, 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 turn. It's all right on the music. There's nothing syncopated about it, right? And everything's very centered, both the male and the female, very centered. High effect juxtaposition. So this is what, yeah, we did lean into it. This is basically the attitude that you're taking two contrasts and putting them together without, now the key thing is without transition, without explanation. Yeah? So there's always in art from all around the world, we have opposites. Yeah? Yin yang, white swan, black swan, good girl, bad girl, hero, villain, like that. Two different opposites is not the key part. It's the juxtaposition of them without explanation. So you can overlap them as a joke, yeah, light and humorous tone. You can do something that is imitative and abstract at the same time. So imitative, right here, I'm taking a sip of my coffee. Here I'm pretending to take a sip of coffee. Imitative, right? So like gestures. And abstract might be like, and just putting them together because, right? Not explaining it. And the thing that this gets used best for is to do things like have double meanings, right? So we mentioned just a little moment ago the cakewalk. Did we talk about the cakewalk already? Did you guys read that, or am I like bringing something up you haven't? Ringing bells? Not ringing bells? No? Okay. I happen to have a visual aid here. Hold on just a second. Which tab is it open in? Do. This one. Sorry, we haven't had our disclaimer yet. Disclaimer coming right up. I haven't watched all of this documentary yet, but it's coming. It's really exciting. It is newly made. It's basically that some scholars from NYU made this documentary that is about our class. And it just got released. I'm so thrilled. Yay! Okay, so let's take a peek in here.
Where the Africans who were enslaved at the time would literally make fun of their masters. They would present themselves and their partner, and they would be dressed in a certain way. And so Africans would create these dances to mimic and imitate them.
It was a way for the enslaved Africans to resist, and in the moment of oppression, they found a way to release and to find humor and joy.
The cakewalk is the foundation for all of Broadway dancing, and thus the foundation for jazz. The cakewalk is the revolutionary moment where something new is produced by this American experiment, if you will, but also this way that Black Americans are disavowed and pushed to this place where creativity is aligned with political possibility.
Okay, that sounds like they're oh yeah, we're gonna get into minstrelsy next, which
African was caught playing drums, their hands were.
Which is where we're going next week. So yeah, see, I just want to like let us in here. Let's take a peek right here. So we talked a little bit a couple of weeks ago about am I getting distracted because this dance is so beautiful? Yes. Okay, hold Amber, hold on. High effect juxtaposition. So reel it back, don't worry. I'll share that dance with you shortly. We talked previously about how the slaves after the uprising happened, how the laws were changed in order to separate indentured servants, so white people who had a certain amount of time for which they were indentured to an owner, but at which point they would be totally free men, versus chattel slavery, where Black men and women and children were owned for their entire life and their children were owned. And those laws were changed after a series of almost successful rebellions, right? And we also lost at that time the freedom to play percussive instruments, which was very much a part of African cultures writ large. But because they were used to help and organize the would-be revolution, then that was one of the laws that the white plantation owners enacted. Ooh, I can show you. Look, I transitioned into that comment. So I'll just give you this little comment.
Organized by playing drums. They communicated with each other with different rhythms. And so after that, if any African was caught playing drums, their hands were cut off. So this rhythm and this music, this spirit was then redistributed throughout the body.
Juba is a social dance that started on the plantation. What they did was use their bodies to make the sounds and to still communicate with each other and really continue that community.
So patting Juba almost immediately sets a standard for jazz as this exploration of rhythm and playful fun, but also political possibility. So information can be shared through how the rhythm is disrupted or arranged.
And that grew into more social dances where you entertain the idea of being elevated, of being white, of mimicking European court dances. So that's where the cakewalk evolved from.
The cakewalk was a dance done on plantations where the Africans who were in...
Right, so I just think that's really nice to show both of those one after the other, right? So you have the Patent Juba dances and the buck dances that came out of Patent Juba that are happening both in community dances, like on the plantations, on farms, and also in places like the Congo Square in New Orleans, where there was like one square that on one day of the week, there was a marketplace for slaves and other partially enslaved, partially free Creole people to come and meet and do their thing, where they were allowed to play music there only. That's part of why Congo Square in New Orleans is so famous. And so you can see those dances, and then this idea of making a comment about the ruling class. And that would be how the cakewalk is expressing high effect juxtaposition and why it's funny, right? So the white people who were paying to see cakewalk competitions, who like actually like let African Americans make livings doing the cakewalk, they didn't realize that they were being mocked because there was such consummate cultural brainwashing that continues on and into minstrelsy, which we're getting to next week, that people believed that there was nothing a black slave would rather do than dance for those white people, which is obviously absolute BS. But it's part of what made it work. And it's also part of how we get, let me get back to my list. I have an extra page open here. Why high effect juxtaposition becomes such an integral part of Black dance. It's like an identifying marker, because if you can't play your own drums, you have to use your body. If you can't rise up economically or socially, you start to make fun of things, and that contrast is somehow letting the white people remain ignorant to the fact that they're being made fun of. Hooray for that. So the next one, I think this is a helpful thing. High effect juxtaposition is heightened beyond the contrast that is within range of accepted standards in the European academic canon. In loud, this contrast, that it's considered bad taste or like flashy. Yeah, so that's it's not just that there's two different things, but that it seems like too much to the European aesthetic. Okay, moving on. Ephibism. Ephibism encompasses attributes such as power, vitality, flexibility, drive, and attack. So if you have older people dancing in a super athletic way, that would be ephibism. It comes from the Greek word meaning youth. If you have really sharp accents, that comes more from the Africanist tradition than from the white Eurocentric tradition. So we looked at that movement, right, of these performers. Everything is very smooth here. The arms are moving basically in sync, yeah? I was thinking about torturing you guys. We don't have to watch this all again. By just like having you stand up on your toes for like 5 minutes while I pretend to have forgotten to assign you to stand up on your toes. And I thought that was kind of mean. But have you ever tried standing up on your toes, like on the balls of your feet, and just staying still as an experiment? Can I give you a homework assignment? Will you try it while you brush your teeth tonight? Because you can hold on to the counter, right? And just be like, I'm brushing my teeth. It takes about 5 minutes. Brush, 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 brush. Just stand on one foot, like on the ball of your foot. Sorry, I was like going to try and show you my feet on the floor, but it's just not going to happen in this tiny room. Yeah? The point being, this is so athletic. Ballet is so soul-crushingly hard. And that's different from the idea of ephibism. They're both about athletic power. Yes, it's true. So how do we tell the difference between athletic power and ephibism as it is used in here? And one of the ideas is suppleness, and not just flexibility, but fluidity. And that is valued more than torso alignment, right? Because you could definitely say with those high kicks and those turns a la seconde that they're both very flexible dancers, but moving your torso around is valued more than holding it perfectly still in ephibism. Also, percussive independent limbs. Do you have questions about any of those four things? Good? Yeah. Okay. I don't know why I opened that up. What did vaudeville look like? I get a little bit past some of this because it's weird. Actually, I'll just skip through as we go. So this is 1937. We're going to come back to a lot of this late, like 1930s, 1920s, and 30s vaudeville when we get to the feminist section. Look at this awkward, like, parade of women. It's kind of like a fashion show. There's usually singing numbers, comedy numbers, animal acts, physical prowess. Yeah? Lead singer, tap dancing. This is obviously a white vaudeville show, right? Everything's still segregated for a long time hence. But wait, what's going on here? What? Hey, where did they get that move, guys? So then, for these solo. So last week we talked a little bit over the past 2 weeks about breakdancing moves, and here they are in this bright white Broadway show in 1937. So let's, over the next 3 weeks, we're going to look at how did we get from A to B. Yeah? How did we get from this community dances that were happening out in public to Broadway and musical theater? And the answer is, we've talked about how circuses traveled around like with small acts, and then there's also vaudeville. And vaudeville is kind of the writ large word. I think I can just play this in the background. Turn down the volume a little bit. It's very hard for me to talk over these things because I get totally distracted. So this is an all, well, it was called an all-colored vaudeville show. 1935. Definitely have Ephibism. Right, why are they in chef's outfits? Well, probably that's the only job they could get. So it's both obvious, but it's also making a crazy comment, right? About how there's a lot more talent behind the scenes than culture's letting on. Dang, dude. Oh! So, vaudeville came from touring acts, like touring circuses, that would happen on small stages and was also very segregated. So, you guys, I just can't even think of all these amazing performers. What the heck? Okay, so I'm going to pause for a second. So there's, vaudeville is generally the term that we think of of these variety shows in general, but previous to this like big Broadway version of vaudeville, we have variety shows, which are even less connected, right? So we had all of those acts, like circus acts, physical feats, singing, dancing, comedy. In a variety show, those acts might have nothing to do with each other at all. So variety shows are sort of like early vaudeville. By the time we get to vaudeville, two things had happened. One, somebody started to get the great idea like, oh, hey, we could put a theme on all of these acts and show a themed show. So like the whole event might all be based on diamonds in the sky, whatever, right? And then also integration, not integration as we think of it in the civil rights era, but melting pot cultures coming together in the big cities because of the Industrial Revolution changed vaudeville a lot. Because when you have variety shows and early vaudeville on tour out in small cities, you have smaller chunks of audiences and you're going to go to them, so you will be like going to an isolated group, those chunks of audiences are going to be like, you know, you went to a small town in Kansas and everybody was white and you performed your white show for the white people and they want to see exactly what they want to see because that's all they know. When you start to get on a big stage that you have to fill up with as many people buying tickets as possible in order to make it work, your audience becomes more diverse. And so when big capital V vaudeville started to really take hold in big cities, you had not just, you know, a small town of all the same religious, like little box full of general people, but you would have Irish and Italian and Jewish and white people all in the audience at the same time. And a lot of jokes and humor, especially in the comedy shows that like carried most of these variety shows, like stand-up comedians, a lot of it was riddles and racist jokes. And you can't do that. You can't like have people stay in your seats if you're making jokes about the Irish when your audience is now a third full of Irish people. And so that big vaudeville change really changed the nature of humor and performance in America. So if we're looking at stuff, here's the other thing I wanted to pop in here, right? So there were singing acts. Just gonna glance at that, and then I wanted to pop forward to, do you remember last time we watched the Nicholas Brothers performance where they were like sliding down the stairs? These are the Nicholas Brothers, like the actual Nicholas Brothers when they were early in their career in 1930. Look at them. He's like 9, I want to guess, the one on the left. Maybe? Tappity, 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 tap. So, doesn't have a lot of acrobatics. Here's another clip of vaudeville acts. So this is 1898 to 1910. You had like strong men, comedy, right? They're just like chasing each other around. Sexist jokes about women. Get out of my dressing room! Right? And then, oh, this is one. And then we saw some of these burlesque items, so we're going to come back to that later. That's my digging earlier today. Where's that last link I'd opened up? Here we go. So there is an excerpt here from a 20-minute Blacks and Vaudeville PBS documentary that I have linked to in our info here. So I'm not going to get too far into it, but it's great. So it not only dives into how performers, especially Black performers, were forced to, for example, wear blackface, and how we are going to take a deep look in the next couple of weeks about Jim Crow, the act that shaped our country's idea about stereotypes about slaves on the plantations, about why Black performers, it's obvious early on why they would wear blackface and have to make jokes to make fun of themselves, because that's what the audiences commanded. And if you're just trying to make money, right, we talked about how sometimes you make decisions in order to make a living. That part is pretty obvious, but it's interesting down later in this section to see vaudeville stars at the end of vaudeville, so that mostly vaudeville was over in like the 1940s, pretty much ended with the Jazz Age, but there were still a lot of vaudeville acts that continued well on into the 1960s, and we can definitely still see remnants of that in some like old films displaying vaudeville acts. But it's interesting to hear some direct interviews with some famous vaudeville entertainers talking about why. Do I have him here closely? Scan, 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 scan. Why still wear blackface?
I said, Pigmeat, what's happening? I said, the bit isn't going. He said, I don't know, I can't express myself anymore. He said, they made me take off the cork, and the cork was not to prove that I was black. They knew I was black. He said, but Negro, that's what he said, but I just lost the edge. I can't feel like I felt when I had the cork on. And he was brokenhearted till the end. Pigmeat was brokenhearted till the end that he had to take off cork.
Pigmeat Markham was one of the last American performers to take off the mask. His fans were surprised to discover that his face was darker than his makeup. He had been lightening up, not blacking up, for 40 years.
So there's our intro to the caveat statement, which is in the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about blackface, racial stereotypes, and it's going to be hard. So I want to make sure that I take a moment with you guys, all of you in the class who are watching recording and not, to say that as we move forward and we're looking at a lot of these racist stereotypes, that I acknowledge that it is emotionally upsetting and that it is okay to skim over that stuff. I hope you will still engage and talk about it with me. But like, if you just feel like I've had enough of staring at this crap, like, take a break. It's okay. Yeah. Let's end on some fun. So I'm gonna go back to this page. So, oh, I thought this link was here. Is it not here? Maybe it's on the next page. So we were talking about, this week we're talking about, you can see that I'm on Safari instead of Firefox. The way that social dances, which are largely inspired or improvised, turn into choreography, and to make that part clear, because there's definitely a white Eurocentric bias towards choreographed work, and the reason is just that white Eurocentric art likes to nail things down so that you can reproduce it and so that you can judge it and so that you can say that this is that. And that should not at all take away from the value, artistic wonder, and accomplishment of improvised work. And in fact, they are quite often connected in their creative birth. So in social dance, when I use and encourage you to use this vocabulary within the class so that we're all speaking the same language. If I use the term freestyle, that means improvisational. And improvisational means that you don't have something in your mind that you're going to do step A, B, C, and D, right? So remember on that day when we practiced a little bit of tap, I gave you toe taps and heel taps and a shuffle. Those were 3 different steps. We did them in a set order a few times, like we did 8 of this and 8 of that and 8 of the other thing. And that would be a choreographed phrase of movement, for example. So choreographed because I told you what the steps are, how fast we're going to do them, and we all faced in the same direction and did them in the same time. If you were freestyling, you could freestyle the order of the steps. You could freestyle the order of the steps in different directions or on different levels, right? So you could do toe taps like jumping and standing, or you could do toe taps like sitting on the floor and just tapping your toe, right? And so the steps, order, direction, those can all be changed. When we're talking about social dance and eventually ballroom dance, what a social dance has This is where the word dance gets tricky, right? What a social dance has is a basic step. Oh, let's stand up. You can't see me. It'll be fun. Maybe I can just stick you on the floor here. You can look at my funky bare feet. Hey! All right. I'm going to stop screen sharing. Then we can all see what we're doing. Okay. So, let's do a basic swing step because it's a basic step. So, go ahead and step to your right foot and tap. Step to your left foot and tap. And then you're going to rock your weight back like a rocking chair onto your right and back to your left. That series of individual steps is called this basic step for swing. So we'll go right, tap, left, tap, rock back right, come back to the left. And you'll notice this is already an uneven rhythm, so you can tell that it is polyrhythmic. Tap, left, tap, rock, back, right, tap, left, tap, rock, back, right. Now you can swing dance, hurrah! Tap, left, tap, rock, back, right, tap, left, tap, rock, back. Yes? You can take this basic step and you can slowly turn it around. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Right, tap, left, tap, rock, step, right, tap, left, tap, rock, step. You can also, I'm cracking up about our tiny space here. You can also bounce your knees a little bit more. So let's try it a little bit quicker. Same step, just bouncing. Right, tap, left, tap, rock, step. Right, tap, left, tap, rock. Eventually this dance evolves and the taps become little triplets. Da, 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 da. This is the Lindy Hop. Do, 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 do. If you are facing a partner, you could switch directions and trade places with your partner. All right, here's our tiny moment of movement. The basic swing step and basic Lindy Hop. Whew. Do you feel ephibistic? Yes. Okay, so social dancing starts with people just rocking out. They find a basic step, like a rhythm or a move that you do on repeat. And then you improvise the order or add-ons on top of that basic step. And that's how you end up with a social dance that, for example, would become a ballroom dance when people do it really specifically. And when you add competition, then you have rules about what you value the dancers doing, right? So if you had a Lindy Hop competition, you would want to see that they could do the basic step and the triplet version of the step, and that they could do it like maybe with really bent knees and really straight knees and with with multiple turns added in. And so by watching it with competition involved, you start to really like codify what a certain social dance is. Oh, I forgot to turn on. There we go. I'm gonna load this puppy up. So when you have,
This is the bop.
oh hey, it's that same
The
lady
bop
we
is
saw
a
in the
type
other
of
one.
social dance. Dance is a language, and social dance is an expression that emerges from a community. A social dance isn't choreographed by any one person. It can't be traced to any one moment. Each dance has steps that everyone can agree on, but it's about the individual and their creative identity. Because of that, social dances bubble up, they change, and they spread like wildfire. They are as old as our remembered history. In African American social dances, we see over 200 years of how African and African American traditions influenced our history. The present always contains the past, and the past shapes who we are and who we will be. The Juba dance was born from enslaved Africans' experience on the plantation. Brought to the Americas stripped of a common spoken language, this dance was a way for enslaved Africans to remember where they're from. It may have looked something like this. Slapping thighs, shuffling feet, and patting hands. This was how they got around the slave owner's ban on drumming. Improvising complex rhythms, just like ancestors did with drums in Haiti or in the Yoruba communities of West Africa. It was about keeping cultural traditions alive and retaining a sense of inner freedom under captivity. It was the same subversive spirit that created this dance, the cakewalk, a dance that parodied the mannerisms of Southern high society, a way for the enslaved to throw shade at the masters. The crazy thing about this dance is that the cakewalk was performed for the masters, who never suspected they were being made fun of. Now you might recognize this one. 1920s, the Charleston. The Charleston was all about improvisation and musicality, making its way into Lindy Hop, swing dancing, and even the kid and play, originally called the Funky Charleston. Started by a tight-knit Black community near Charleston, South Carolina, the Charleston permeated dance halls where young women suddenly had the freedom to kick their heels and move their legs. Now, social dance is about community and connection. If you knew the steps, it meant you belonged to a group. But what if it becomes a worldwide craze? Enter the twist. It's no surprise that the twist can be traced back to the 19th century, brought to America from the Congo during slavery. But in the late 50s, right before the Civil Rights Movement, the twist is popularized by Chubby Checker and Dick Clark. Suddenly, everybody's doing the twist. White teenagers, kids in Latin America, making its way into songs and movies. Through social dance, the boundaries between groups become blurred. The story continues in the 1980s and 90s. Along with the emergence of hip-hop, African-American social dance took on even more visibility, borrowing from its long past, shaping culture and being shaped by it. Today, these dances continue to evolve, grow, and spread. Why do we dance? To move, to let loose, to express. Why do we dance together? To heal, to remember, to say, we speak a common language. We exist and we are free.
Yay! So this link is in your readings for this week, so you can watch it a gazillion times. I certainly have. I love it. And you'll notice that we are always seeing the same dang 2 videos of Cakewalk. Does anybody know why? Because there was no film. There's like really only that one film. And it was pretty late in the Cakewalk, because Cakewalk started in the late 1800s. Another fun fact I thought about when she's talking about how the twist became a worldwide dance craze, one of the reasons why the twist became so popular is because it really was this social pressure to learn dances in order to belong, to be cool. And the twist was the first one where you could really just, you didn't have to know how to hold your partner. You didn't have to be in embrace or hold hands. You could really just individually solo, which was normal in a Black community dance setting, but not so normal in the white community dance setting, where people were still like doing the waltz and the foxtrot all the time. And so the twist was really a moment where dance in America as a whole started to invite individual movement. And that maybe that there's a little bit of a shrug, like, why not? And why that is so important is because women were kind of not allowed to dance on their own without being seen as like loose, right? And so when the whole world was like, hey, the twist is cool, then suddenly you have a lot more social freedom for women, which is kind of mind-blowing. There was one more thing I wanted to say about this very end here. Here we are. What do you call this?
To express.
Formation.
Why do we dance together?
Not the individual soloist moves, but what's happening in the formation there.
To say.
2 lines. People coming down the center. From the TV show, Soul Train. Yeah? Where else did that come from? Da-da-da-da-da-da. Ding! The cakewalk. So this idea that we all call the Soul Train now, where you have everybody waiting in their turn, like holding the rhythm on either side, right? It's not a circle like we talked about last week. It's the 2 lines and the soloist coming towards you. That's from the cakewalk. So in some ways, we still do it today. All right. I think that's our big coverage for now. This is our discussion materials page today. So in the Dixon Gottschild article, she is talking about a ballet. I've cut out most of her deep dive into the ballet part where she's showing that the ballet is doing jazz elements because we're not focusing on ballet. But if you want to take a look at what ballet she's referring to, this is the link here. And then Earl Snakehips Tucker, which is like the main dance performance she's talking about. This is the thing. This guy's wild. Oh, look at him going. This is 1930, this video. Doesn't look an awful lot like Bone Breaking. He's amazing. So you can kind of see how we're going to end up talking a lot about sexuality in the upcoming weeks too, especially when it comes to racial stereotypes. Get ready for that.
That fella's mother was killed by a pretzel.
Oh, man. I forgot that nice racist joke is at the end there. And there you have it, guys. Vaudeville racist comedy. So, I apologize for that. We didn't probably need to actually hear that. I'll make a note for myself and for everyone else. But that's where we're going next because it's part of our history and we need to know about it to not make the same mistakes. Yeah. Any questions? Requests? Concerns? Wishes? Hopes? Dreams?
Mostly that I'm even though I'm going to be hearing a lot of jokes, it just makes me laugh when people just take off their black makeup and they're just all like, "Oh my god, they're black," and I'm just all like, "Be serious."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me take a peek at our list of modules for next week. I think it's nice to know what's coming up. Okay, here we are. 6B, 7C. Oh, this is just for fun. It came up when I was updating last semester. So next time we're going to talk about minstrelsy, Bojangles. Now, everybody loves Bojangles now. They did not always love Bojangles. He's a complicated historical character and super inspiring. I just want to like front load that we don't get to write about him because everybody writes me the same answers too much. So like, actually, I think I have one question that you get to write about Bojangles about because he's amazing. He represents so much change and ceiling breaking in this country. Where is... So 2 weeks from now, we're going to talk about the Whitman Sisters, who are they were an all-woman touring company on the Toba circuit. They also broke a lot of glass ceilings for Black people and like were able to perform in front of all white audiences. The beginnings of the civil rights movement. I'm trying to think. I think it's next week when we have, yeah, this article, Reconstruction and Minstrelsy. So we're going to talk about racial stereotypes here, and we're going to also talk about how after the Civil War, we had this era of amazing civil gains for Black people that got screwed up because of political greed and crushed, and that's how we entered the Jim Crow era. And so we're going to discuss that part of history, and this is what I was looking for just now, they're like kind of writ small, but there's some really amazing articles here about blackface and also yellowface and other racial stereotypes that happened in performances in America. This is sort of the area where I'm saying like you don't have to deep dive if you don't need to see a lot of it, but it's an amazing resource. And then this part of your page like really gives a long but fascinating historical timeline if you want to deep dive into here about Reconstruction, how it failed, how the Ku Klux Klan rose, and so right. Anyway, I think I've said it's going to be heavy about 17 gazillion times, so you probably all get it now, yes? All right, but please come, bring your questions, bring your anger. Yeah, and other than that, I will see you next week. Yeah. Ta-da! We're done. If you want to go, we can go. If you have questions, I will hang out for a little bit. I think I have a office hour